Hi there. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about how to analyze a visual. You'll need to know how to do this on your diploma exam because on the written portion, one of the assignments is to do a visual reflection where they give you a visual and you can either respond in a creative way or in a more critical or analytical way. And we'll talk about that specifically later. But right now, we're just going to talk about how to approach analyzing a visual. So all of the pages in this tutorial are in your course, and you can go through each one and read them, and I would encourage you to do that, but I'm going to talk you through them as well. So starting with this page that you're looking at here, this describes how to use the what, so what, now what approach to analyzing any visual you encounter. And it's easy to remember, and it can really help you when you need to analyze something visual. So you start with this first section, the what section. And that is exactly what it sounds like. You ask yourself, what is happening in this visual? Where is my eye drawn? And what is the visual trying to tell me? So this whole section is about trying to figure out the main idea in the image and what techniques are being used in order to communicate that main idea. The second section is the so what section. And this is where you connect personally, either in your own life or to people you know, or people you've read about or heard about, or even to other texts that you've seen or read, like films, other visuals, books, things like that. Sometimes in the so what section you can connect just to the issues that it raises, even if it doesn't directly relate to your life, and that's considered a personal connection as well. The final section is the now what section, and this is figuring out how the image relates to the general viewer or to society as a whole. So is there anything in the image that relates to common societal issues, things that are happening in the world today, anything that would relate to a lot of people, that would sort of fall in this section. And that's a good thing to consider because it helps you understand the theme of the image, which is that the main idea that the visual creator is trying to communicate to you. And you'll need to know that theme in order to write a visual response. So we're going to look at an actual image and apply this what, so what, now what approach. So you'll see on this page the image called Seattle Grandpa's Place, and you can click on it in your course and it'll allow you to see that a little bit larger. So we're going to look at just our first impressions. And when I look at it, I notice that the lighting is low. And low light can be used to either create kind of a relaxed mood or a more sad mood. So I need to figure out which one it is, depending on some of the other details. I'm also looking at the focal points. I'm trying to figure out who is or what is the focus of the image. And in this case, I'm guessing it's the grandfather based on the title. I'm noticing the male because the male on the sort of overflowing pile there it keeps drawing my eye, and I feel like that's important somehow. The other thing that I really noticed is the body language of the female in the picture. She's not even on her phone, she's not eating, but she's not talking to this man. And I don't know if it's her grandfather or if she's a home care worker. I'm still trying to decide that, but whatever the case, she is not very engaged with him, and nobody looks particularly happy. So that kind of, at least that's my first impression of the image, and that's a good place to start. The next thing I'm going to look at, I'm still in the what section, is the composition of the image. How is it organized? And so some visual text creators use the rule of thirds. Not all, but it's fairly common. You learned about this earlier. And it's a way of dividing up an image so that it's pleasing to the eye and balanced, and also lets the viewer know what the focal points are. So you imagine a grid laid over the image, just like this, 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines. And then you look at where those lines intersect. And often those will be the focal points of the image. And in this case, that's true. The grandfather, the female, and the towering pile of male. And when you look at those three things together, you start to realize that they tell a story. And we'll get to that in a second. Sometimes the midground, the foreground, and the background can tell you some important information about an image. Often the most important stuff is in the midground, and sort of the extra detail is in the background and the foreground. That's not as true in this situation, but it's something to consider. The next thing I'm going to look at, still in the what category, is lighting. And we mentioned it earlier. This is low light or low lighting that we're seeing here. And now I'm starting to think that that's being used to set kind of a sad mood based on the overflowing pile of male, the disengaged female, and those sorts of things. Now let's just take a quick look at some of the other details of the composition of the image. So notice that the grandfather is lower. He's at a lower angle than the female, and that's indicated by this orange line right here. And that might indicate that he is sort of in a lower position. He's feeling a little bit diminished by his age and his ability to take care of himself. Notice these blue lines too. In a very subtle way, the lines in the room kind of frame him. And we know from what we learned earlier that framing can sometimes give this idea of entrapment. The person's being trapped by their circumstances. And if he's this older guy who's sort of losing the ability to take care of himself, that would fit with that theory. So I put all those details together, and I kind of feel like the main idea this image is trying to communicate to me is that people can feel isolated or lonely, even when others are nearby. So now I'm going to think about the so what. Why does this image matter to me? Or how can I connect to the image? And I thought about my grandma Jensen, who's also getting older and also struggling to take care of herself and her home. And so when I visit her, I notice that things are starting to fall apart. She just isn't as able to keep up with the paint that's peeling, her squeaky doors, her empty fridge. Those all tell me that she needs help more and more. And she's also lonely, and she lives alone, and when we visit her, you can tell that she's desperate for connection. And I really thought about the man in the photograph and how he relates to her. This also reminded me of some other texts. So if you look at shows like Modern Family or The Simpsons, they kind of romanticize getting older and they make it look funny or fun. And to some extent that can be true too. But I kind of feel like the grandfather in the cartoon film Up is more realistic. He's kind of a grumpy old man and he's struggling to come to terms with getting older, maybe losing some of his independence and losing some of his dreams. And I thought that especially related to the grandfather in this image. So now the last section, now what? How does this image relate to society as a whole? And what theme statement could I come up with to describe it? And so I think the theme is, sometimes there is a sadness associated with old age and having to adjust to a life of depending on others and living with loss. And I think this is relevant to society because we all age. We watch our parents age, we've watched our grandparents age and maybe pass away, and eventually we will deal with aging ourselves. And so it definitely relates to all of us in that way. So I have a lot of information that I could use to help me write a response on a diploma exam, or to analyze an image in any kind of situation. I hope that helps.